Hello, YouTube audience. Today I'm going to discuss the issue of Asperger, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my own life and background, who I am, and well, I don't know how much I'll be able to touch on the entirety of who I am, but definitely I'll touch on some aspects of my life. Um, as far as the politics around Asperger, I don't tend to discuss that too much. I tend towards the anti-cure position. That's obviously I'm not going to have any comments or anything like that. This is my story, and if it helps people who also have Asperger, that's great. Other than that, or maybe parents with a young person with Asperger, that's great. But there's no debate on this. This is unlike the other videos. This is simply my story. So I'm going to state my position. I tend towards being anti-cure. I know it's a complicated issue. Good people can disagree. And there are people who do not take the anti-cure position, and I respect their reasons. I definitely am against aversives, electroshock. I believe that the Judge Rottenberg Society should be shut down utterly and completely. There should, people involved should be prosecuted for, human rights abuses at the very least. Now that's an extreme, though. There are obviously people who don't favor the Judge Rottenberg Center, but who favor some kind of aversive therapies or that type of thing. And they may be people of goodwill who take issue with my stance, but my stance is that the real help for people with Asperger lies in the realm of the psychological, and it lies in the realm of understanding, it lies in the realm of self-knowledge, and it lies in the realm of an accurate understanding of just what Asperger really is. Asperger does not mean that you're necessarily some kind of a genius who's going to be the next Einstein. It doesn't mean that you are going to solve the continuum hypothesis, which, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Definitely I didn't refute Cohen's argument. I simply added an axiom that I believe would affirm it, and I suppose you can argue that anybody could just add an axiom or make up an axiom. So, the question is the axiom philosophically valid? Okay, anyhow, those are the other videos. I don't intend to discuss CH right now. Asperger does not mean that you're going to be the next Einstein or the next Newton. It doesn't mean that you're going to it doesn't mean anything beyond what it is. And that is, I think there's an expression, if you've met one person with Asperger, you've met one person with Asperger. It's not a one-size-all phenomenon. You are not going to, and that's why I believe that the whole idea of a cure is, quote-unquote, in quotes, is misguided. Because I don't believe you can really cure a personality type. I don't think you can really cure what somebody does in this world. It's just not really possible. There are treatments, and there are things perhaps for extreme, when there are, comorbid syndromes, maybe can be treated. And I'm not 100% averse to psychiatry, but you've got to be careful of the pharmaceutical cartels and all of their agendas. So, you got to be careful even there. Really, I think a good psychologist, a good therapist, somebody with a level of empathy, not just head knowledge about psychology, but a level of empathy and a willingness to deal with either an adult or child on a level basis would go a long way. And definitely more empathy in the educational system would really go a long way. Now, in terms of my own personal life story, I was undiagnosed until my 30s, and that added an extra level of complication for me, and that is that I just very simply was socially awkward from a young age. From a very young age, I had interests. Astronomy when I was 6. At 7, I was spouting off to people 4 times my age about relativity. I was always pretty good with science and math. When I got to college, when I got to my high school years, I interestingly enough, I almost went through a path of development that might be very similar to a lot of people in the neurotypical world, which would be I got into kind of philosophy, poetry. I wanted to be, I read a lot of Alan Watts and a lot of the types of things you wouldn't maybe necessarily associate with the stereotypical view of Asperger as somebody very linear and focused on this. Again, this is a stereotype, okay, focused on chess or computers, something like that. I was never really that big into computers. I was into math and science, but not that much into computers. I'm not very technical, curiously enough. So anyhow, I went through that phase, and by the time I was in college, some of the more psychological, some of that, let's say, the disability aspect of what Asperger is, began to manifest. I began to, for one thing, I began to focus on specific areas of interest and not so much in the coursework, and that hurt me a great deal. I didn't understand. And I think maybe some of you who've been through college on the spectrum can understand this. I didn't really understand the one. This is going to sound ridiculous, but I didn't understand that you had to study in order to know a subject. I mean, I figured you'd go into, and some of you can relate to this. This isn't laziness. This isn't what you think it is. It isn't, I just wanted to party all the time. I just honestly did not understand that you had to, you couldn't just go to a lecture, get really into the lecture, and ask a lot of good questions and then learn. I mean, I didn't understand that you had to read the textbook and do a lot of problems. This is my problem in high school, too. I mean, I went to a top university, one of the top, I went to UC Santa Cruz. What was I thinking? I mean, when I got in, and things were very promising, but it didn't work out. I managed to get out of there in good academic standing, but I had to go someplace else to graduate just because of, the issues that were arising that were rather intense psychological issues. And so as it is, I got my degree in a subject other than physics and math. I have enough, I don't have advanced degrees in physics and math like a lot of you do. I got enough to be credentialed and enough to teach, but I don't have enough to really be a professor or anything like that. So if some of you are wondering, part of my, it was only recently that I got back interested in mathematics and physics, particularly logic and philosophy again, and made an intense personal study of that for a while, reading about even there, I read more about areas of my own interest and focus than necessarily a textbook. So I still have some of the old disability. I think a lot of you who are in college and high school can relate to this, and that is, you're very sharp in your own areas of focus, but it's very difficult to focus on areas that are not your area of focus. And in my own case, and I think some of you can relate to this, you can also get caught up in the sense of personal oppositionalism. When you feel something's being imposed on you, you melt down. And I haven't had a good meltdown in a long time because I've learned a great deal of psychological self-control. But I have in the past, and believe me, it's not a pretty sight. So I actually think I'm going to make a part 2 out of this because I really want to tell a little bit more about my own personal story. It's hard to fit these things into 10 minutes. This is in the way of an apology. With a lot of my videos, I don't have a script in front of me where I can go through a bullet point. And especially a lot of you maybe on the spectrum would appreciate that, a little bit of a guide. Some of you would like that. And neurotypicals would probably appreciate the same thing, but just for some strange reason, that's not part of how I function, and so I just don't do it. Let me do a part 2 because I think that this subject deserves more conversation.